Star Wars is full of characters held together by metal and wiring, and some of them barely qualify while others are more machine than person. From a single hand replacement to an entire body rebuilt from scratch, the franchise has over a dozen major cyborgs spanning films, shows, and comics. Today I'm breaking down every single one of them and everything we know about their modifications, starting with the most iconic cybernetic moment in the entire saga, Luke Skywalker. Here's the thing about Luke Skywalker. He's technically a cyborg. One hand. That's it. One single mechanical hand, and he qualifies for the list. But that one hand might carry more thematic weight than every other modification we're going to talk about today combined. You know the moment. Cloud City, Bespin, Vader has just delivered the worst news any son has ever received, then immediately follows it up by removing his right hand with a lightsaber, just in case the emotional trauma wasn't enough on its own. Luke received a fully integrated prosthetic aboard a medical frigate shortly after. Synthetic skin covering, virtually indistinguishable from a real hand. A medical droid pricked each fingertip to confirm full sensation, near organic dexterity from a chunk of metal. But here's where it gets interesting. The hand itself isn't the story. The symbolism is. For most of Return of the Jedi, Luke keeps that hand covered in a black glove, hidden. Then comes the throne room on the Death Star 2. He's just beaten Vader. He's hacked off his father's mechanical hand in a rage, sparks flying from the severed wrist, and Luke looks down at his own gloved fist. One glance. Father and son, same hand, same path. He sees the wires spilling from Vader's stump, looks at his own covered prosthetic, and refuses. That single moment of recognition is Luke rejecting everything Vader represents. He throws his lightsaber away. I am a Jedi, like my father before me. One hand, one black glove. And it tells a better story than most characters get with their entire bodies. But if you think one prosthetic limb is where this list peaks, Fennec Shand would like a word about what happens when someone rebuilds your entire midsection. Fennec Shand. Here's something that'll mess with your head. Fennec Shand is technically more cybernetically enhanced than Luke Skywalker. Luke's got a hand. Fennec has an entirely rebuilt abdominal cavity, a reinforced lower spine, enhanced hearing, upgraded eyes, and a subdermal mesh woven through her torso. But you'd never know it by looking at her, and that's entirely the point. After taking a near-fatal gut shot on Tatooine circa 9 ABY, Fennec was rebuilt from the inside out, not with flashy chrome limbs or obvious mechanical joints, but with modifications specifically designed to be invisible. Her cybernetics don't show up on standard medical scans. Think about that for a second. She could walk into any Imperial checkpoint, submit to a full bioscan, and register as completely organic. For an assassin, that's not just convenient. That's the difference between life and death on every single job. But here's where it gets interesting. Her internal upgrades aren't just about keeping her alive, they're offensive tools disguised as medical necessities. A subdermal kinetic weave mesh reduces blunt force trauma by 40%, meaning you could hit her in the stomach with a pipe and she'd barely flinch. Enhanced auditory implants let her detect heartbeats within a 10-meter radius. Not footsteps, not breathing, heartbeats. She can literally hear you being alive through a wall. Her optical implants push low-light vision down to 0.001 lux, which is equivalent to starlight conditions. Complete darkness functionally doesn't exist for her. Every single modification was built for one purpose, making an already lethal assassin completely undetectable while making her harder to kill. No visible seams, no mechanical whirring, no glowing eyes, just a woman who can hear your pulse quicken from across the room and see you perfectly in pitch black, which is, not ideal if you're her target, but if you think invisible cybernetics are unsettling, wait until you meet someone whose implants slowly erased his entire personality. Lobot. Every other cyborg on this list got something. A new arm, new legs, enhanced combat abilities. Lobot got something taken away, and nobody ever talks about it because he literally can't tell you himself. Here's the thing about Lobot that changes everything. That wraparound headpiece isn't decorative. It's a Lobot series cyborg construct, a brain-computer interface grafted directly into his skull. The thing links him straight into Cloud City's central computer systems, letting him manage the entire city's operations in real time, communications, security, life support, all of it running through one man's head, which is, not what brains were designed for, but here's where it gets dark. In the expanded lore, the implant gradually overwrites the user's personality. The longer it stays active, the more the computer takes over, and the less of the original person remains. Lobot's been wearing that thing for years. Every day he uses it, a little more of who he was gets eaten by the machine. In the Marvel comics, we actually see him before the implant fully took hold, cracking jokes, running heists with Lando, being a whole person. Then the implant's autonomous functions kicked in during a crisis and never fully gave him back. That silence in the films, that blank expression Lobot carries through every scene scene in Empire Strikes Back? It's the implant winning. The man is in there somewhere, but the computer interface has suppressed his personality so thoroughly that he can barely communicate beyond responding to direct commands. He's not stoic, he's being overwritten, and despite all of that, despite being slowly consumed by his own hardware, Lobot used his connection to Cloud City systems to covertly override Imperial security protocols and help Lando evacuate the city. Vader was standing in the same building and never noticed. The quietest man in the room was running a one-man resistance operation through pure computational warfare. They didn't give him a weapon, they didn't give him armor, they gave him an implant that's slowly erasing him, and he used it to save everyone anyway. But if you think losing your personality is bad, wait until you hear what the Separatists did to a clone trooper they captured alive. Echo. Every cyborg we've talked about so far chose this, or at the very least, someone who cared about them made the call. Echo didn't get that luxury. Echo got captured by the Separatists, strapped to a machine, and rebuilt as a living computer feeding enemy strategies straight from his own mind. Let that sink in for a second. He's a clone trooper. His entire existence was designed around one purpose: kill droids. And now he's hooked into Separatist technology. His body more machine than man, kept alive only because his brain was useful to the enemy. That's not irony. That's cruelty with engineering degrees. The damage was catastrophic. Both legs gone, left arm gone, massive trauma from the explosion at the Citadel on Lola Sayu. Most people don't survive that. Echo survived it and then spent an unknown stretch of time being slowly converted into a strategic asset by the enemy. Not healed, weaponized. There's a difference, and it matters. The Techno Union didn't rebuild him out of mercy. They plugged him into a stasis chamber and used his mind as a living algorithm, feeding Republic strategies to Admiral Trench during the Battle of Anaxes. They gave him a SCOMP link integrated directly into his body, neural interfaces wired into Separatist systems, life support that kept his organs functioning at the bare minimum required for his brain to keep transmitting. These aren't life-saving modifications. These are data extraction tools installed in a prisoner of war. But here's where it gets genuinely disturbing. His cybernetics weren't designed to help him function. They were designed to keep him suspended between life and death indefinitely. Echo was conscious inside that chamber, aware, trapped in a half-alive state while his own knowledge was used to kill his brothers. That's not life support. That's a torture device wearing a life support costume. Think about what that does to a person. You're a soldier. You're supposed to be strong, unbreakable, one of millions of identical warriors. And now, your own mind is the weapon being used against everything you fought for. Your flesh trapped inside enemy hardware, and the information in your head is getting your brothers killed. You are the enemy, and you can't stop it. The body horror here is real. This isn't a warrior choosing augmentation. This is a prisoner being hollowed out and turned into a tool against his own people. But at least Echo's story has a rescue. The next cyborg on our list wasn't so lucky. Val Exterior. This is the most obscure entry on this list, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Val has maybe 3 minutes of screen time and roughly 0 pages of dedicated lore, but sometimes a character doesn't need a novel's worth of backstory. Sometimes they just need one detail so absurd it carries the entire entry. She died on a bridge and nobody cared. Let me explain. Val appeared in Solo, a Star Wars story as part of Tobias Beckett's crew. She was a demolitions expert and by all accounts a competent criminal operative. She had one job during the Conveyex heist on Vandor 1, plant thermal charges on a bridge to separate the coaxium payload from the train. Except the mission went sideways when Enfys Nest's Cloud Riders showed up and Val made the call to detonate the charges while she was still on the bridge, so she just blew herself up, which is, not ideal for Val, but here's where it gets genuinely frustrating. Val was the first black woman to have a significant role in a live-action Star Wars film, and the writers gave her roughly 90 seconds of characterization before killing her off in the first act. She had more lines in the promotional material than in the actual movie. That's a creative decision so baffling it carried its own controversy for months after release. Here's the thing that elevates Val beyond random crew member who dies early, though. Thandoi Newton publicly expressed disappointment with how the character was handled. She's spoken about feeling like Val was disposable, a character introduced specifically to be sacrificed for Beckett's emotional arc, and she wasn't wrong. Val exists in the film almost entirely to make Beckett's later betrayal feel more justified. Her role was built to service someone else's story, and the real kicker, Val had 0 appearances in any follow-up material for years. No comic backstory, no animated cameo, nothing. Lucasfilm either forgot about her or deliberately left her alone. Probably both. We don't know her full history with Beckett, we don't know how she became a demolitions expert, and we don't know what jobs she pulled before this this one. But a self-sacrificing explosion and a real-world controversy about representation, that's more personality than half the characters with actual dialogue. But if you think Val's treatment was rough, wait until you meet Bylert Valance, because that man is basically held together with spite and scrap metal. Bylert Valance. Most cyborgs in Star Wars get their parts because of destiny, the Force, or some grand narrative purpose. Valance got his because the Empire chewed him up and spat him out. That's it. No prophecy, no Sith Lord pulling strings. Just a former Imperial cadet who took a bombing run to the face during a ground assault on Mimban and got left for dead by the institution he served. And the Empire didn't rebuild him out of loyalty. They patched him up just enough to discharge him. The cybernetics that replaced half his face, his chest, and his arm weren't top-of-the-line Imperial engineering. They were functional, bare minimum, enough to keep him breathing and walking, not enough to make him comfortable. So he did what anyone with a half-mechanical body and zero pension does. He became a bounty hunter. His cybernetics are built for punishment. The chest plate houses a palm-mounted blaster that fires directly from his hand, no holster, no draw time, just point and shoot. His mechanical components make him significantly more durable than a baseline human, capable of absorbing blaster bolts and physical trauma that would kill most people outright. That's not a prosthetic. That's a weapons platform shaped like a person. But here's where it gets genuinely unsettling. Valance hates what he is. He despises droids, despises cybernetics, despises the mechanical parts keeping him alive. The Empire turned him into something he finds revolting, and then abandoned him. Every job he takes, every bounty he collects, he's doing it in a body he never asked for and actively resents. That self-loathing fuels everything he does. Crimson Dawn, the Rebellion, the Empire, they all try to use him at various points, and he lets them, because a man who hates himself that much doesn't have a lot of reasons to say no. He's essentially the blue-collar Vader. Same disfigurement, same walking life support system, but built by military negligence instead of Sith philosophy. Vader exists because Palpatine needed a weapon he could control. Valance exists because the Imperial war machine doesn't clean up after itself. One is a tragedy, the other is a line item nobody bothered to file, which is, somehow worse. But if Valance represents what happens when an empire discards a broken soldier, Saw Gerrera shows what happens when a man destroys his own body for a cause nobody asked him to die for. Saw Gerrera. Most cyborgs in Star Wars get their modifications to survive. Saw Gerrera got his to make a point. Here's the thing about Saw that separates him from every other character on this list. His cybernetics aren't just life support, they're a manifesto. Every piece of metal grafted onto his body is a deliberate statement about what he's willing to sacrifice, and more importantly, what he wants you to know he's sacrificed. The lung damage came first. Years of brutal guerrilla warfare ravaged his respiratory system so badly he needed a full respirator apparatus just to keep breathing. By the time we see him in Rogue One, he's tethered to a pressurized suit, hauling around breathing equipment like a man held together by spite and tubing. Standard survival stuff, right? Except for one detail that changes everything. He never hides it. That's the key. Saw lets his enemies hear the labored breathing, every rasping inhale, every wet exhale, completely audible to anyone in the room. Most people would mask that vulnerability. Saw weaponized it. He turned his own suffering into psychological warfare, walking into rooms and letting the sound do the intimidation before he ever said a word. Then there's the legs. Cybernetic replacements visible beneath his armor in Rogue One. Mechanical limbs carrying a body that should have quit years ago. His left arm, also replaced, fitted with combat-ready prosthetics built for a man who never planned to stop fighting. No elegance, no sleek Imperial engineering. Just brutal, functional hardware bolted onto whatever was left. But here's where it gets complicated. There's a chicken or egg question the community has never resolved. Did the cybernetics worsen Saw's mental instability, or was the paranoia already there, and the mechanical parts just gave it a louder voice? Some fans point to his behavior in the Bad Batch, arguing the extremism predated the injuries entirely. Others look at the progression from Clone Wars freedom fighter to Rogue One radical, and see a man whose body became indistinguishable from his ideology. The machine parts didn't corrupt him, they just made the corruption visible. That's what makes Saw unique. Vader's suit is a prison. Grievous's body is a weapon. Saw's cybernetics are a political statement. His body says, I will never stop, I will never heal, and I want you to hear exactly how much this costs me, which is, not ideal for long-term mental health. But at least Saw chose his modifications. The next entry on our list had his forced upon him by gravity and a very angry Jedi Darth Maul. Most people, when cut in half, have the decency to die. Maul didn't get that memo. Instead, he fell down a reactor shaft on Naboo with zero legs, zero plan, and apparently zero quit in in him. He survived purely through hatred, not medical intervention, not luck, hatred. The dark side kept his organs functioning while his mind completely shattered, which is, not ideal. Here's the thing about Maul's reconstruction: it wasn't some clean surgical procedure in a sterile facility. His brother Savage Opress found him over a decade later, raving mad on Lotho Minor, wearing spider legs he'd cobbled together from garbage. That spider leg phase is genuinely one of the most disturbing things in Star Wars. Imagine a torso with a Sith tattoo skittering toward you on 6 mechanical appendages, like something out of a fever dream. Savage dragged him back to Dathomir, where Mother Talzin used Night Sister magic to restore his mind and give him proper cybernetic legs. The reconstruction wasn't some drawn-out medical process. Talzin's dark magic rebuilt him in a single ritual, pulling his sanity back together while simultaneously crafting new legs from salvaged metal. One moment he's a babbling spider creature, the next he's standing upright with burning yellow eyes and a very specific name on his lips. That's not a recovery, that's a resurrection powered by witchcraft and spite. But here's where it gets interesting. Maul didn't just come back functional, he came back dangerous. Those cybernetic legs gave him back his full martial capability, the same acrobatic fighting style, the same relentless aggression, but now with limbs that don't tire, don't feel pain, and can take hits that would shatter bone. He went from garbage spider to conquering Mandalore in what felt like no time at all. He built a criminal empire, took over Death Watch, and killed their leader Pre-Vizsla in single combat to claim the Darksaber. The Mandalore takeover is the part people forget. Maul didn't just want Kenobi dead, he wanted to rule. He installed a puppet government, commanded an army of Mandalorian warriors, and drew Obi-Wan to him by murdering Duchess Satine right in front of him. He built an entire criminal syndicate called the Shadow Collective just to create enough chaos to lure one Jedi into a trap. That's not rehabilitation, that's revenge architecture on a galactic scale. Every alliance, every conquest, every calculated move was driven by one thing: making Obi-Wan Kenobi suffer. Maul turned his own survival into a monument to spite, and honestly, it worked. He came back stronger, more cunning, and meaner than the apprentice Palpatine threw away. But if Maul's cybernetics are a story about rebuilding yourself through hatred, the next entry is about being rebuilt by someone else entirely, and kept in a cage made of metal and pain. Darth Vader. Here's the thing about Vader. Everyone knows he's a cyborg. Everyone knows the suit, the breathing, the black armor, but most people think of it as a power upgrade, like he got hurt, got rebuilt, came back stronger. That's not what happened. What happened is Palpatine built him a prison and made him wear it for 23 years. After Mustafar, Anakin Skywalker had 90% third-degree burns across his body. His lungs were charred tissue. His vocal cords were destroyed beyond any natural speech. The suit that replaced him maintains internal pressure at 0.7 atmospheres, just to keep what's left of his lungs from collapsing entirely. Remove the helmet for more than a few minutes and he dies, which is, not ideal for someone who used to be the most powerful Jedi alive. But here's where it gets genuinely cruel. The suit's breathing rhythm was deliberately calibrated by Palpatine to mimic Anakin's pre-injury breathing pattern, not a generic respirator cycle, his old breathing. The rhythm he had when he was whole, when Padme was alive. Every inhale, every exhale is designed to remind him of the person he used to be. That's not life support, that's psychological warfare built into his chest plate. The vocabulator in his helmet synthesizes speech from vocal cord vibrations too damaged to produce sound on their own. So that iconic voice, that deep, commanding presence that terrifies entire star systems is artificial, manufactured from the ruined whisper of a man who can't even speak without his cage's permission. His ocular implants give him electromagnetic spectrum vision, but cap his peripheral sight at 260 degrees, meaning he physically cannot see threats approaching from certain angles. A deliberate vulnerability, his armor-plated limbs grant roughly 5 times human strength, enough to lift 900 kilograms, but the total suit mass sits at 120 kilograms. He's carrying that weight every second of every day, strong enough to crush a man's throat with one hand, but never light enough to forget what he's wearing, and he never gets to stop. The suit requires coolant flushes every 6 hours to prevent hyperthermia, recycling 95% of his bodily fluids in the process. There is no sleeping through the night. Every 6 hours, maintenance or his body cooks itself from the inside. That's not living. That's surviving on a timer someone else set. The limbs are strong, the armor deflects blaster fire, the respirator keeps him breathing, and every single system is a leash. Palpatine didn't rebuild his apprentice. He built a cage that could swing a lightsaber. But if Vader is a man trapped inside a machine, wait until you hear about the creature who chose to become one, and lost everything looking human in the process. General Grievous, every cyborg we've covered today still has a body. Modified, sure. Enhanced, absolutely. But underneath the metal, there's still a person in there somewhere. Grievous makes you question whether that's even true anymore. Born Chamain Jaishilal, he was a Kalish warrior, fully organic, fully alive. Then he lost 73% of his biological body. Not gradually, not piece by piece, over years of conflict, just gone. What remained got stuffed inside a 2.7-meter Durasteel endoskeleton with 4 independently operated arms, each one capable of spinning a lightsaber at 200 RPM, which is, not ideal for anyone standing nearby. But here's where it gets philosophically uncomfortable. His brain, the one organic component that actually matters, floats in a liquid-filled chamber, not wired directly into the mechanical systems, not integrated like a droid's processor, suspended, preserved, fed through an intravenous nutrient sac that needs replenishment every 12 hours, or the whole operation shuts down. That's not a man with robot arms. That's a brain piloting a war machine. His mechanical lungs processed oxygen at 180% efficiency, letting him operate in hard vacuum for 30 minutes. His optical sensors gave him 320-degree vision with hyperspectral analysis reaching 10 kilometers out. Every system in his body was designed for one thing, killing Jedi, and the only organic piece left was the tactical genius needed to do it effectively. Here's the thing. Grievous self-identified as more machine than man. He said it himself. The Separatists deliberately kept his brain organic rather than replacing it with a processor because a droid can't improvise, can't adapt, can't hate. They needed the hatred. They needed the trauma. They needed a person's rage inside a machine's body. So the question that's been building through this entire video finally lands. At what percentage does a cyborg stop being a person? Vader's at roughly 80% mechanical, and nobody questions his personhood. Maul lost his lower half, and he's still Maul. But Grievous? A brain in a jar driving a murder skeleton? The community can't even agree on whether he counts as a cyborg or just a very angry droid with a biological hard drive. And honestly, I don't know what to tell you. There's no clean answer. Every single character we've looked at today exists somewhere on that spectrum, and Grievous is standing at the far end, waving 4 lightsabers, daring you to draw the line. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.